The Navigating Disability podcast often discusses topics including disability, injury, mental health, and mentions of sensitive issues such as trauma and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. Please take care while listening. Today on Navigating Disability, we're joined by Lisa Grech, a passionate advocate with deep lived experience. Lisa lives with multiple sclerosis and is the carer for her adult daughter, Hannah, who has a severe intellectual disability and is nonverbal. She's committed to ensuring that the voices of people with profound disabilities and their families and carers are heard, especially when they can't speak for themselves. We're honoured to have Lisa with us to share her insights, challenges, and the importance of recognising the full diversity of disability experience. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. You've got such a big experience with disability. Can you share what your life is like for you living with multiple sclerosis?
Sure. So I've had multiple sclerosis now since the year 2000, and so onset in 1999, and I was incredibly lucky because I was diagnosed quite quickly. Especially for back then, the diagnosis period has sped up for a while, but a lot of people are left in a limbo of what's going on for me for a while. I am one of those people that, when I'm needing an answer, I'm like a dog with a bone. And so I just went to doctor, and I was very lucky that one of the doctors decided that I didn't have a middle ear infection and it was worth sending me to a neurologist. And so it unraveled from there, the story starts from there. I went for an MRI, and often in MS, people will have some damage in their brain, but there needs to be damage over time. And so a year later, I went back for an MRI, and that confirmed me having MS. And if I'm honest, my MS is less impactful on my life than my role as a carer. And I think that, and I'm not saying it's not impactful. I mean, look, I go to the toilet more times a day than you could. I don't know. I was going to try to rattle off one of those sayings that I'm terrible at, but a lot, and my balance is really bad, and I've got slower information processing, but I'm still quite functional. I fall over a bit and have some nice photos of some black eyes. But I'm still very functional within most things that I want to do. I've got to say that hitting menopause with MS has been a bit of a perfect storm, because depression is my other thing. It's a symptom of MS, but also, in my family history, and menopause affects mood as well, and information processing, cognition, and so it is this sort of perfect storm. And I have noticed my left side is getting weaker, but again, it's I'm just traveling through life. I do have my own NDIS plan, so I'm really lucky with that, to keep me functional, because my goal is to work through to natural retirement. So
But
yeah.
can I just clarify, when you say functional, do
Yeah.
you equate that with independent?
Look, independent, but also my ability to do day-to-day life activities, and so to get in and out of a car. So I guess it is similar to what you would talk about independence. I guess there's levels of independence, and so yeah, I haven't really thought about it in those terms, but yes, I would say that it aligns. Yeah.
So you mentioned your role as a carer, and that I'm assuming has been there since day one, since your daughter Hannah was born.
Yeah.
Tell me about that journey.
Yeah, sure. So Hannah was full term. She was induced, in fact, and spent 28 days in hospital after birth, because she was having seizures. And look, it was an interesting journey because I thought that she was having seizures in utero. And I did discuss it with a couple of medical doctors. One of them said, if you don't know what you're talking about, you're a first-time mother. And another one said, look, we could put you in hospital and on a monitor for a week, but don't know whether it would change anything. In hindsight, I would have taken that option. But of course, hindsight is 2020 vision, as they say. Look, from there, it was just crazy. And so having a person with a disability, and especially from birth, and especially an unknown condition, which Hannah's condition, she does have a rare genetic condition, but I didn't find that out until she was 17. And so out of hospital, it was endless doctor's appointments as she got a bit older. It was going lots of allied health, and going to, I guess, get her assessed. She was behind from birth, but she was falling further behind. And so then there is that complete divergence from what is normal in after having a baby. So I went to a few of the mothers groups, but I found that intimidating because all of their children were doing what they should have been doing, and my child wasn't. And they were also talking about how they, caught up for coffee every day, whereas in my mind, I was just running from appointment to appointment, absolutely exhausted, and on top of grieving for this place that I found myself in. Hannah is now 22, turning 23 years old, and she is a absolutely beautiful, cheeky, kind, caring person. She's nonverbal, and she does have a severe disability, and so that has a huge impact on my life as a carer. And it has an impact because it limits my ability, it limits my independence. It also has an impact on my fear for her in her future, an impact on, inclusion, basically things that we along her life she's been excluded. She was in a mainstream school, actually in primary school, until the end of grade 4, and it was actually a really nice experience, a lot of it, but as she was getting older, she started getting excluded from birthday parties because the birthday parties were things like rock climbing centres, and so the parents made a decision that Hannah couldn't do that, therefore she couldn't come. And so there was that exclusion, and also, I think that we decided that it was time for her to move from a mainstream school to a special development school when the camp was a bike riding camp. And so we were offered her to go on the bike riding camp, and she could just sit in the bus because she couldn't ride on the road. Or she could stay back at school. And so that was the decision, that it was time for us to move from a mainstream school. But I'm still really glad that we did that while we could. And so she went to a school, a special development school, Glen Allen, and they were amazing and inclusive, and it was almost that feeling like, "Oh, I'm home," because I was with people who got it, who knew the story.
I understood.
Yeah, who knew the grieving and the hard battle, being a carer for a person with a disability like Hannah's, an intellectual disability, is a battle. You are fighting for, and you hear this for people with a disability more broadly, but I would say it doesn't change for a carer. You're fighting for that person. You're fighting for their rights. You're fighting for inclusion. You're fighting for acceptable services, for funding, and so being with other people that understood that was much easier for me than being with people in mainstream community that didn't generally get it. Yeah.
You talked about earlier on your journey where you're thrown into this caring role,
Mm.
and you mentioned that Hannah was your firstborn, so you didn't actually know any different to what was considered normal. When did you realize that you needed to grieve, and how did you grieve for what you weren't going to have?
Yeah, I realized at day dot because she was in hospital for 28 days, that this was not a normal process and it was a hard process. I think that it was unfolding, but grief is not a clean cut experience in disability when you're grieving because everybody has a child hoping that that child will be able to do whatever they want to do in life and reach their goals and so forth. But when you have a person with a disability and a severe intellectual disability, you grieve for going, even though I felt like I was at home and when we got to a special development school, I still grieve that we couldn't do mainstream anymore. I
That you
grieve.
had to go to a special school.
That's right. That we needed to do that for Hannah to be included. I grieved when I felt excluded from the mothers group and that wasn't an intentional exclusion, not at all, but I didn't fit in there. That was grief. I grieved when I for everything she lost, for everything, for every milestone that Hannah doesn't have in life, for the fact that she is you know nearly 23 and not doing the things that a 23-year-old would do, and that she won't have a boyfriend and get married and do all of the things in life. So it's like this constant grieving that occurs when you're a carer. But I think that the other thing I would say is it's complicated also with this self-blame. I very much, because Hannah didn't have, she has she has what's called PAX1 disorder. It's a very rare genetic condition. But I didn't know that until she was 17 years old. So, I blamed myself for everything I could have done wrong in pregnancy. I was her incubator and I got it wrong. Like that was for me, it was just like, did I have the bath too hot? I fell asleep once and I had the electric blanket on. Did I overheat too much? Did I eat the wrong food? I actually fell over once when I was pregnant. Was that the cause of it? So it's grief mashed up with this self-blame, which is part of grief as well. But I don't think that ever goes away. Even when she was diagnosed, I looked at how, because Tim is her dad, Tim and I don't have the genetic mutation, so it is sporadic. And so I had the understanding that could have happened in early gestation. So it still could have been my fault. So even then I didn't let myself off the hook. And it is this grieving process of, despite my love for her and my acceptance for her and my I absolutely adore her and she lights up my life and just makes me happy. And I mean, when my mental health is down, she's the thing that I get out of bed for. She's the reason I go to the gym. She's the reason I stopped drinking nearly 6 years ago now. She is my why. And there's no lack of love when I talk about grieving. It's absolute love and respect and honor for her, but it is mashed up with complicated feelings.
And that's really interesting, and it's a beautiful way to put it. So how do you overcome that grief and that guilt, and how have you moved to that place of acceptance now?
Yeah, I think that is a process, and I don't think that it's one journey for everyone. I don't, or one process for everyone. I think that people reach acceptance at different times, and over different durations, and I actually think that you can reach acceptance for different areas as well, and that you can slide back, I mean, acceptance until Hannah misses out on something again, or acceptance until, she's making noise in a supermarket and people are staring at you. And, that even though I'm okay with that, I'm still a little bit like, shh, Hannah,
It brings it back.
that's right. Exactly. That, when people actually, it's quite interesting because, Hannah makes lots of vocalizations that are often quite loud, and people will look around. And it's usually the children that will stare, and that actually doesn't bother me so much because I know that they need to learn, but it's the parents' reaction that does bother me, because some
Yeah.
parents will sort of do the don't look, don't stare, and to me it's like, no, let them look, please let them stare, talk to them about why she is different so that they become okay about it, so that.
Give them that experience, that
Right.
interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, look, I do think that, I just don't think it's a clean ride as an experience, for a carer, the experience of being a carer. Yeah.
And I think everybody's journey is different, as you said. So
Yeah.
it's very hard to pinpoint one thing. What are the hardest parts of being both a carer and someone with your own disability?
Yeah. So I think that the hardest parts are that, I mean, the practical hardest parts are things like, sometimes you just get tired because, MS wears you out, etc. And so, and or you'll get unwell, and particularly with my mental health, sometimes I'm in the throes of a major depressive episode, and I still need to get out of bed and do the carer role. It doesn't stop. And actually, I did all of my study as a mature age student, and that similarly, and parents of typically developing children would know as well, if they've done study later on, that once you've got a child, it doesn't stop. I guess the difference is that, Hannah's nearly 23, and that's still the same thing, that her needs come before mine, and that doesn't matter about my disability or what else I'm doing in my life, because she's not aware of that, and it's not a malice, not aware of it. She's
I was
just
going to say, is that because
not
she
aware.
doesn't understand what your needs are?
Yeah, I mean, look, Hannah thinks that she is the center of the universe, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. She doesn't have that awareness that actually there's other people. She does have that awareness of, if someone's crying, they're sad, and she'll give you a hug or something like that. And similarly, she goes to Bailey House, which is a day program, and similarly, she will with the other participants at Bailey House. She's got that lovely caring nature, but she still doesn't broadly understand that, okay, that might mean that you can't do something for her, or she doesn't have that broader understanding of other people fit into her life. It's like, I want it and I want it now. she's she's
And good on her.
Yeah, and she's, look, she is amazing at keeping me and actually everybody in her life in order, because she loves routine. But it is that idea of, we're going to fold the clothes and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. We're doing it all at once. And it's like, no, Hannah, I can't do that. I physically can't do that for you. So she doesn't really have that understanding of how she needs to fit in to the rest of the world. And yeah, that's hard when you're navigating your own path as a disability, with a disability. And look, from the perspective of the emotional and the impact on me socially, I would say that there's a impact of this, tussle between, I get incredibly frustrated with the idea that a carer's voice doesn't matter. And, I have spoken about this before. And it's not that it doesn't matter, but it's in the disability space, a carer is seen as somebody that is a supporter or a person with that's an ally. And I would argue that no, a carer of somebody with a disability that is like Hannah's, or of a person with dementia, say, or severe behavioral disability, it's an enmeshed relationship, and it becomes, it's not it doesn't it's not uh, Hannah's disability has placed limitations on me, has
False.
mean that I've had been excluded from things, that I've had to exclude myself from things because they're not appropriate to bring Hannah along to. I've had to limit my career to being in Melbourne. I've got, as with many carers, of children who will never be independent. I've got this massive fear of what on earth will happen when when I'm not around to look after Hannah, and when her dad isn't. And we're setting that up as much as we can now. And we've got Hannah's got SDA funding, so specialist disability accommodation funding. And we had to go to the tribunal for that. So we've had to do the fight for Hannah. And so I find it, frustrating and hard from a disability perspective, that my lived experience as a carer is sometimes not necessarily seen as, I guess, as important as a person with a disabilities experience that might be completely different or might be less. And I guess that if I relate that to my own experience with MS, it hasn't affected it hasn't limited me in the same way as my role of a carer. I haven't experienced the same level of grief that I have, the same challenges, the same exclusion. And so, sorry, that was my cat meowing, if you heard that.
No.
Um, and so I think that I find really challenging as well, because it is so impactful on my life being a carer. And so, I want a seat at the table. I want my voice to be heard about that. And so I have, sort of, I guess, butted heads a couple of times with different people in the disability community that have, I guess, suggested that the carer's voice, or criticized the carer's voice on an issue that I, I passionately believe carers have a right to have a say in. So I think that has been hard for me. Yeah.
And we thank you for that passion, because without people standing up, it's not going to get any better. Can I ask you about your relationship with Hannah's father, Tim? How did having a severely disabled daughter affect that relationship? And then with you getting your own disability later on, how has that all worked?
Yeah, so I had MS before having Hannah. So I have had MS for the whole time, but MS is progressive, so it obviously has got worse over time. I am incredibly lucky, if you can be lucky having MS, I'm incredibly lucky that it's quite mild. And admittedly, I was probably just in not denial, but it's just like, there's different layers, different levels of acknowledgement of disability. And I was just like, well, okay, I've got MS. I'm just going to get on with my life. Admittedly, I did my PhD on the topic, so I wasn't just getting on with my life, but that was my way of coping with having MS. And then, when Hannah came along, it actually made me get very serious about my own health, which, there's definitely benefits to having a person with a disability, because it does make you reassess what's important in your life. And so with relation to Tim, I guess I would say that Tim and I should say, we get along incredibly well, and we cohesively look after Hannah, and I wouldn't have it any other way. We do 50-50 care, and we're actually doing an SDA, so specialist disability accommodation build, where we will live next door to each other, and Hannah will have a bedroom and a lounge room that is accessible to both um, of the townhouses. And so I tell you this,
Amazing.
yes, look, and I tell you this because it does highlight that we do get along well, but has been hard. It's incredibly hard. We're out definitely fast tracked our separating, because it's everything is so stressful when you have a person that has a disability and you're grieving, etc. And so it did fast track our separation. And I'm not, I would not say that we wouldn't have got separated anyway at some stage, but but that's the way it went. And so, I guess that also limited our, we didn't have any more children, and neither of us partnered. And so I always hoped that one of us would, so that we would have a sibling that would be around, when we're not around anymore. But Tim and I have worked, it has meant that we have both had to limit things. Tim is a sailor, and he has to limit his sailing opportunities because of his caring responsibility, and because he knows that if he takes too longer, sail around somewhere, that I'm going to fall apart, because of the extra burden that places on me to do all of the care. Um, yeah, so it's been, we work cohesively, and that's how it works. That's the best way for us to work. But we know that doesn't, not everybody can do that, So I guess we are lucky that we put that at our forefront.
I don't think it's luck. I think it's more that, you two are incredible people that have put your daughter first, and you should be commended for that. That's amazing. And I'd love to hear more, maybe off air, about this SDA that you are building. I think that's just phenomenal, and a way forward for the disability community. Have you found certain supports, either formal or informal, that have made a big difference both to you and to Hannah?
Hannah has an incredible support team, and so that definitely makes a big difference. Tim and I are quite particular who we will invite into the support team, and that requires us to accept a level of loss of support as well, because if we can't get a shift covered, we won't bring somebody into our house that Hannah doesn't know or that we don't know. Um, so we've
So
got,
then again, it falls back on you.
that's exactly right. Yeah, yes. So the amount, we are very lucky that we have relatively flexible jobs, and that we can just say, okay, no problems, we'll pick her up, or whatever. So, but that has been great. We've had a support worker with us that's been with us for at least 16 years, and another
Oh,
one Yeah, and another one for I think 5 or 6 years, and another one that's been there here for you for about with us for about 4 years. So they are all amazing people, and and we do have another person that does a shift. So she's got quite a big team, but I think that one of the things Tim and I really look for is people that want to do support work as a career rather than just to get them through their education, etc. Because there's more of a passion there for that
Yeah.
from that person, those type of people that are looking at it as a career, but also they do stay along longer because obviously somebody that's doing it to um, get through their OT education is going to go
Pay the
on
bill.
be an OT at the end of it, and we wouldn't blame them for wanting to do that. So look, I would say that has been incredibly helpful in this SDA journey that we are going on. We are now, I'm sitting in an SDA funded home, and that has been incredibly helpful while we do this build that we're doing, and that was from amazing. Shout out to Housing Hub; they are absolutely amazing. But from an amazing service provider, I think that in disability it can often be hit and miss, and so when you get the hits you really grab hold, and we really did get getting them on board is the reason we've got SDA. I have no doubt about that. So I think that those type of services have been really important to the success of our journey, and also the flexibility of support workers. So we do have some support workers that go through an agency and some that work for themselves, and so that allows us the opportunity to work the way they want to work, and then they're prepared to hang around longer. Yeah.
And your point of, when you find a good provider, you keep them, you hang on for dear life because you know that they're the right fit for your family.
Yes.
What advice would you give to other parents or carers who might just be starting out on their journey? So where you were 22 years ago.
Look, it is so hard for people who are at that earlier stage. So hard from so many reasons that I've spoken about, the grieving, the not, being thrown into a different world than you expected, learning about what is available, etc. I guess my advice to them would be you are your best advocates, and hold on to the people that are good advocates for you. I think it's really hard. I've spoken before about NDIS discriminating against people that can't advocate for themselves very well from an access perspective, and so I would encourage them to be an advocate for their person, and if they can't do that, to find an advocate. Again, it's holding on to those service providers, and that does mean not settling. If your first support coordinator doesn't work for you,
Move
that's
on.
move on. You are allowed to move on. It's your
Absolutely.
journey, because yeah, you are the advocate for your person with a disability, and you do make a difference in that, and in so many ways. And so please, I guess my thing that I would say is please don't think that you're any less. You are their absolute, you're taking this journey with them, and yeah, that should be respected.
What I like to say to my clients is that you know your child or the person you're caring for better than anyone else. Trust your judgment. And you hit on it before when you said if you had your time again, you would have gone and stayed in hospital and been monitored.
Mm.
You probably trusted all this advice that you were given, but if you really sat with it, maybe at the time, you would have gone and done that. So trust yourself because it's so vitally important. You know yourself better than anybody else.
Yeah, and I think the thing I would add to that is it's okay if somebody gets annoyed with you for you advocating
Hmm.
for your person, for your family, for your needs. If they get annoyed with you because of your advocating for what your family needs, then that is okay. They don't have to like you. They just need to be helping you get what you need to get through. Yeah,
And if not, you find someone else that
precisely.
does support you.
Yeah.
Lisa, we've loved talking. As we begin to wrap up, what are your hopes for the future, both for yourself, your family, and the disability community as a whole?
Sure. I guess my hopes for myself and my family is that we will relatively smoothly do this build that we're doing, the SDA build. And, that Hannah, instead of having to move each week from my place to Tim's, will be able to live in her one, area and just access the different apartments from there, which will be so much more settling for her and nicer for Tim and I to be able to support each other as we age. I guess my hopes also are that the NDIS settles down right now. It's so scary for people with disabilities and for carers. And I think that there needs to be clear guidance around that. There's obviously lots of people advocating that know much more about it than I do, but I certainly hope that that does settle down because it's such a crucial support for people with disabilities and for carers of people.
It's a very scary time out there.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely is. And I guess that the thing that I would ask from the broader disability community is, we're all on the same team. And I think that that's the important thing that I would like to get across, that I know that sometimes if you don't like somebody's language, so long as it's coming from a place of respect, that's the key here. So
And good intention.
that's right. It's so, acceptance and that disability is diverse and carers' experiences are diverse, and therefore we're going to have diverse opinions, and that is okay. So please accept that sometimes they are going to vary from, your own, but again, it brings it back to that respect and like you say, good intentions. So I just hope that we get a little bit more of that in the disability community.
Lisa, I've loved speaking with you and hearing about your experiences. Thank you so much for your time today.
No worries at all, Kate. Thank you. Thanks for having me.